And let's go, let's start this October with a bang. I was thinking about doing a ranking of the 3 best horror franchises of all time. Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. But then I thought with myself, how about put these franchises to battle themselves and find out between Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Michael Myers which of them is the best slasher of all time and which one has the best franchise of horror history. So to do this bloody combat that is much better than just Freddy versus Jason, because it's Freddy versus Jason versus Michael, I required the best information from Elm Street, Haddonfield, and Crystal Lake to come up with the best categories to pitch these franchises in a deadly combat. We'll have 7 of them. The best kills, which means which of these slashers kills most beautifully, with most grace, with most elegance. I'm kidding, with most brutality. The best final girls, that is, the best heroines of these franchises. The best backstories, after all, each of these villains have fascinating origin stories. Rest in peace, which means the best deaths of the villains themselves in this series. Who has the most quantity of deaths? And the best ones. Who is the scariest? After all, if they are slashers of horror, one of them must be scary at least. The best remakes, cause each of these franchises have remakes in their chronologies. And then taking all these categories into consideration, which one has the best franchise in terms of consistency? And without wasting time, let's go to the first category, that is best kills. Starting with Freddy Krueger, here we have a villain that works in the reality of dreams, which gives him the freedom to kill his victims with much more creativity, instead of just knives and axes. In this case, Freddy also has an advantage that, for his kills to be in the world of dreams, his productions need much more budget. We are talking about the metaphysical world here, and not an abandoned house or a dark forest. So his movies play with this idea that the more creativity in his kill scenes, the better. In the first movie, you have the death of Tina, that is levitated in the air and then dragged on the walls and ceiling of the house while Freddy butchers her in the dream. And this is already one of the most classic and scariest scenes of the franchise. Besides this, you have the Johnny Depp scene where he's sucked into the bed and becomes a huge fountain of blood going up. And during the franchise, you're gonna have many more classic scenes. The scene where he shoves the girl's face into the TV set saying, "Welcome to prime time, bitch." In the third movie. In the fourth movie, you have a repetition of the Johnny Depp scene of the first one, but this time, he drags the boy into a waterbed while the boy is having a wet dream. In this same movie, he transforms a girl into a cockroach and squashes her inside a lightning match box. Because she was afraid of cockroaches. It makes all sense. It's a jewel of cinema. In the fifth movie, he stuffs a girl with food until she blows up. And in the same movie, he transforms a guy into a ghost rider, fusing him with his own motorcycle. By the way, a very well-crafted scene. Now going to Jason, he is much more brutal. No time wasting with fancy stuff. It's machete on the head, or when he feels a little more inspired, he uses a more extravagant weapon. But in this case, I think this is the franchise that has the most shocking deaths of the 3. In the second movie, you get this guy in a wheelchair that gets a machete on the face, and the wheelchair climbs down a huge staircase in the middle of the forest and in the rain. Of course, things start to diverge to comedy soon enough. At least from the 6th movie, where he becomes a real zombie, things go bizarre. He starts to chop 3 heads at once. In the 7th movie, you have the classic scene where he gets a girl in a sleeping bag and hits the whole thing at the trunk of a tree and kills her right away. But sometimes he overreacts in the creativity level, like the classic scene from Jason X where he freezes the girl's face and uses it to clean a sink right beside him. And in Michael Myers, we have a more discreet fella, someone who likes a little bit of choke, who likes to use more brutal force and his knife. Few times he left the comfort zone. I think I remember just one scene from Halloween 6 where he shoves a guy in an electric box and explodes the man's head in an explosion that is more potent than the Death Star from Star Wars explosion. Taking into consideration the three styles, this is the most unfair category because the high budget takes the advantage, but also the most classic scenes from horror movies that belong to Freddy Krueger, so point for him. Now talking about final girls, all the franchises have memorable final girls. In Freddy Krueger we start by Nancy Thompson, that is his main rival, but then we also have Kristen from the third movie, that is a cutie. In the fourth and fifth movie we have Alice, that is for sure the most badass of them because she armed herself to fight him in a dream. Then the Friday the 13th franchise had the most final girls because in 12 official movies they never repeated any of them. And all of them are beauties, but the greatest highlight goes to Jeannie in the second movie that used psychological skills to kill Jason in the end of that story, dressing as his mother and also using a very warm motherly voice to deceive the villain, which didn't help much because he returns in the end of the movie to get her again. So, in the sixth movie you have Megan, that is the sheriff's daughter, who is a very charismatic character. And in the seventh movie you have Tina, who has superpowers to fight the great villain. And with a mental power alike the Jean Grey from X-Men, she really kicks his ass. Moving to Halloween, of course, you have one of the most classic final girls of cinema in Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode. And if we count the 13 official movies in the franchise, she has been in 7 of them in total, which probably gives her the crown of Final Girls Queen. But then we also have great final girls like in Halloween 4, for example, in Rachel Corroders, which has a very fraternal sister relationship with another character that could be considered a final girl even though she is a child, in Jamie Lloyd. But what would I like to take into consideration to give the point in this category? What's the level of connection and rivalry that the final girl has with the villain? In Friday the 13th, between final girls that are good and others that are so-so, basically they are all discarded from movie to movie, so no points here. In Nightmare on Elm Street, we obviously have Nancy, who has been in 3 movies. 4 movies if we count the remake, but I prefer not to count it. And I really like her as a character. She's super cute, she's a nice girl, she holds her own against Freddy when it's necessary. Her level of connection with Freddy is not as great, if you think about it, as much as Laurie Strode versus Michael Myers. And everybody knows that the Halloween franchise is a mess in terms of continuity. So much so that you can find different universes inside the franchise in terms of which movie connects to the other. That is more complicated than the Marvel multiverse. So much so that inside the same series, you have a version of Laurie that is sister of Michael Myers and other that don't. You don't understand? Maybe I do a video one day to explain. Anyway, both versions, the one that is sister of the villain and the other that don't, have a very strong connection with him in terms of rivalry. He ruined her life since the first movie, and until today she has trauma because of that, spending years waiting for the right moment to finally get her revenge. So I guess there's no much argument here. The point goes to Halloween. Going to the backstory category, like I said, the 3 villains have very interesting origin stories. Starting by Freddy, ignoring the fact that he was a child murderer, which is something in very poor taste, all the parents of Springwood, that is the city that he lives, decided to gather and corner him inside a place to set him on fire. And after his death, he made a deal with hell to come back in the form of dreams and haunt the children of these parents in the future. It's a very sinister backstory that is very well thought. And with Jason we go more to the side of pity, because in the childhood he was a boy with mental issues and also some deformities. Then some kids pushed him into the Crystal Lake, and since he couldn't swim, he drowned in there. This made her mother think that he was dead, and for revenge, he starts a killing spree in the camp in the story of the first movie. What the old gal didn't know is that he was still alive, living as a homeless guy in the forest. And after she is killed by Alice, the final girl of the first movie, he takes the job of killing everybody that decides to camp in Crystal Lake. Moving to Halloween, this is the most sinister story of them all. Cause here we have 6-year-old Michael Myers, who kills his own teenage sister, stabbing her to death in the night of Halloween. Then he is placed on a psychiatric hospital for many years, until escaping again and returning to Haddonfield for a killing spree. As I said, the 3 origins are good, but as with Jason we feel a little sorry for him, that doesn't please me so much. The dispute is between Freddy and Michael, and I think like this. Since Freddy was already a very evil adult, that's a little less scary than a child, for which there is no explanation for why he is that evil. I mean, there is no explanation until the 6th movie where there is a whole gibberish about a satanic cult. But we ignore that and take into account the whole mystery for why there is such evil inside a human being. As Loomis said in the first movie, he spent 8 years trying to treat the boy, and more 7 trying to keep him in prison, cause he realized that inside those boys' eyes there was nothing except the evil itself. Oof. And this story is much more scary and possible than a guy that attacks people in the dreams, so point for Michael Myers. Now let's go to Rest in Peace, which means which villain dies more beautifully in the movies. Starting by Freddy, being faithful to the idea that he works in the dreams, his deaths are always metaphysical, so there's always something more demonic in them. He always loses strength and vanishes, or turns into light and disappears. Of course, there was a time that he was blown up by his own daughter with a dynamite in Nightmare on Elm Street 6. But the crown of his best deaths comes in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which the souls that he sucked during the movie start to come out of his body and fully destroy him, pulling his meat out by many little arms, destroying his head. And it is a great death because the visual effects in this scene are amazing. Until today, using a great mix of puppetry and life-size people inside a huge puppet body of Freddy, it's simply terrific. Going to Jason again, his deaths are much more brutal. So there's always somebody stabbing him with his big knife. In Friday the 13th 4, he takes a machete in the eye, then he slips and falls into the machete, sliding his own face into the blade. In Jason Goes to Hell, the 9th movie, you have his best death in my opinion, that is a SWAT team coming from the trees of Camp Crystal Lake and doing what everyone should do when there is a slasher that never dies. Shooting him with all possible artillery and a rocket launcher, of course, to blow him up for good. The only detail is that this is not his final death in the movie. Actually, it is in the beginning, and then he becomes this worm that jumps from body to body, possessing people around. Anyway, in the rest of the series, his deaths are always a little underwhelming. It's all about drowning him back to the lake where he should never have come out. But there's one detail about Jason that cannot be ignored. He's the one that most dies during his own franchise. Actually, the one who most dies and resurrects. Plus, from movie 6 to movie 8, there is a pretty good continuity about the place that he died in the previous movie, moving to the next. So I'm gonna take this into account in this category. In Halloween, there were few times that Michael actually died. And this is the point, because at least Jason assumes himself as a zombie that will always return. In Michael Myers' case, there's never a real explanation. For example, why he comes back from being shot millions of times by the cops in Halloween 4. To the point that they come up with a ridiculous scene in Halloween 5 where he jumps from a river to escape an explosion and is carried by the water as if he was in a water park. I even made a video about the funniest scenes in horror movies, and this one is there for sure. He actually dies in Halloween 2 when Dr. Loomis set him on fire. In Halloween H2O, Laurie decapitates him, and finally in Halloween Ends, where, following a Jason logic, where nobody knows what to do with him anymore, he gets crushed by a huge machine. So because in Nightmare on Elm Street there is only one good death, and in Halloween there are some good deaths, but at the same time it's all a mess that never explains how Michael returns, I'm gonna give the points to Jason that knows how to die and return appropriately in the next movie, so points for him. Now in the scariest category, we all know that a slasher's job is to be scary. So I think this category will be defined by the tastes of each one and what scares us the most. And to be honest, Jason doesn't scare me at all. And depending on the group of teenagers that he kills from movie to movie, I even cheer for him to kill them all. And again, because of his origin, I feel a little more sorry for the poor guy. In Freddy's case, we can feel a little more angry because of him, and feel fear, of course, because of the whole dream scenario. Plus, he doesn't have one of the most pretty faces of cinema, but he becomes such a comedian after the third movie, to the point that I never felt scared of him, not even as a kid when I watched the sixth movie, that he dresses like a witch. But then comes Michael Myers. And yes, this one has an imposing presence. Doesn't matter what situation we find him. Even though they tried very hard to make him a clown in Halloween 8, where he almost fought Kung Fu with Busta Rhymes, the rapper, they couldn't remove the sinister factor of this character. And great part of this comes from the mask. This white face with no expression is sensational. If I see someone at night wearing this mask, I shit my pants. So, point for Mike Myers. Now let's go to the best remake category that I'm not gonna waste much time because all franchises have very poor remakes. But anyway, it's a point in common that must be considered. Starting by Freddy, this is the worst one of the three because I remember watching the trailer for the movie and thinking it was awesome. But then when I went to watch the movie in theaters, it was one of the biggest disappointments I ever had. The movie's a mess. It doesn't even come close to the consistency and how well told the story of the first movie is. Plus, they tried to replicate some of the visual effects that made the original movie so classic in CGI, and you just can't do that, come on. Now moving to Jason, even though it is a weak remake as well, at least is more faithful to the original spirit of Friday the 13th. Stupid young people that go camping and die by his hands. That's it. Following the whole idea that they are there to fuck, to do drugs, and get butchered in the best possible ways. And I like Jason in this movie, I really like his visual. And then comes Halloween that comes very close to Nightmare on Elm Street in terms of shit. But here for a different reason, because instead of being a mess like that movie, here it tries to be something more, and bring to such a simplistic idea from the first movie, a whole drama about the origins of Michael Myers. And this is the greatest scene of Rob Zombie as a director of this movie, trying to explain what doesn't need to be explained. When you place Michael Myers in the mystery zone and only shows the crucial moment in his childhood that turned him to be what he is today, you make things much more sinister and leave to the imagination of the audience to put the puzzle together of what happened during the dark years. So there's no other way around. The best remake, or at least the least worst, is Friday the 13th. More 1 point to Jason. And finally, the best franchise overall, which is a very hard task to decide, but what I'm gonna take into consideration here. Which of the franchises have the best consistency, or which one you can watch and there is a progression from movie to movie where you can see a timeline connecting the events from one to the other. Starting by Freddy Krueger, I think the timeline here is very interesting in terms of consistency. You have the first movie, in the second one you have Jesse, the boy who comes to live in Nancy's house, plus he finds her diary in the house, which is a great connection. In the third one you have Nancy returning and now helping other kids who have nightmares with Freddy, so much so that the name is Dream Warriors. In the fourth movie, half of the cast from the third one returns, and then we have a switch in the protagonism, because in the third one you have Kristen, and now in the fourth one you have Alice, who is her best friend, because Kristen, well, you know what happens to her. Then Alice remains as a protagonist in the fifth movie, and she doesn't even die, which is very good. It's just in the sixth movie that you have a turn in the plot to another storyline. But then in the seventh movie, you have the return of Nancy, once again for the third time, and you have a very meta-narrative that takes all the 6 previous movies into consideration. So in terms of consistency, well done, Freddy. Moving to Jason, you almost have a progression line during the franchise, but usually it's all about new young people arriving at the camp to be murdered. The problem is that they do that sometimes from one day to the other, like if nothing had happened in the previous day, which is very poor explained, and then they go to space and anyway. But the real problem is in Halloween, that you have, like I said, many universes inside the same series of movies. 1 and 2 are okay, they're sequels to one another. Then 3 doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the franchise, we don't even have Michael Myers in it. Then we have number 4 that continues the story from 2. Then we have 5, then 6, then stop. Then we have 7 that ignores 4, 5, and 6, continuing straight from 2. Then we have 8, and stop again. Then we have the 2 remakes from Rob Zombie that the less we talk about the better. Then we have the last trilogy that does what? Ignores all the previous movies, continuing straight from 1. Did you get it? Me neither. The point is that this is the kind of continuity that we have in this franchise. So there's no other way. Points for Freddy Krueger. But taking all the points into consideration, the winner of this combat is Halloween. As my final thoughts, I love all the 3 franchises. They were part of my childhood/teenage years. Until today, I still like to watch the movies, but in my opinion, it's pretty fair that the Halloween franchise is the winner, because Michael is my favorite of the 3, and Halloween 1 is on the top 10 my favorite movies of life, so there you go. But this is just my opinion. What about you? Comment below. What did you think about this duel? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Tell me your opinion about who is your favorite slasher of these 3. And as usual, don't forget to leave your beloved like in this video and your most welcomed subscription in this channel so we can keep trashing together forever. Plus, we are in October, so we're gonna have a lot of fun in this horror month. Alright? Thank you so much, see you in the next trashing video, and bye bye.